Trayvon Martin shooting. Trayvon Martin was a 17-year-old African American who was shot dead in Sanford, Florida in February 2012 while he was visiting his father. He went to the store to get Skittles and an Arizona tea, and on his walk back he was shot by George Zimmerman. Trayvon was completely unarmed. George Zimmerman is Mexican, but in this case is labeled as a white Latino. He called the police before the incident, reporting a suspicious man, and the police told him to stay put, but he chose not to, and therefore ended with Trayvon Martin being shot dead. The whole case sparked a national debate over racial tension because George Zimmerman was not arrested or initially charged. This event has many larger questions at issue that you could go towards, but I chose to go with the question of Latino racial identity, focusing on the aspect of George Zimmerman's identity. In an article used on my last screencast from the Latino newspaper, the Latinos asked, what is a white Latino? And I want to search into why he was labeled a white Latino and what a white Latino really is. I'd like to try to relate this case to the West by relating it to the time of the World War II when all the Mexicans were also labeled as white. And I'm wondering if this aspect has followed us into this day and age. How would this case have been portrayed if they labeled George Zimmerman completely as Hispanic or Latino rather than a white Latino? What would the difference have been?
My first source is from CBS News, and it's an article about how race plays a confusing role in the Trayvon Martin case. The article talks about the controversy between George Zimmerman being labeled as white and a white Latino. The article says that the police described the shooter, George Zimmerman, as white. His father called him a Spanish-speaking minority with many black relatives and friends. The article goes on to talk about some resources like Twitter and the genuine confusion about Zimmerman's race. You know, is he white or is he Latino? Then the passage says that Hispanic people can be black, white, Asian, or mixed. Some 18 million Latinos checked the some other race category on their 2010 census form, which admonished in bold letters that Hispanic is not a race. So many Hispanics identified themselves as white. The overall number of white people in the United States increased. This article really helps support the controversy between George Zimmerman being labeled as two different races. My next resource is the book Trayvon Martin, Race and American Justice, Righting Wrong. The main part that I want to focus on in this book is Chapter 5, which is labeled as The Whitening of Latinos. This chapter talks about how George Zimmerman was whitened as a Latino and benefited from the white privilege. This book really relates to the more historical question of this event and what a white Latino is. It says that in the 1930s, for instance, the Census Bureau recognized Mexicans for the first time by including a separate racial category from Mexican Americans, despite the fact that at the time courts defined Mexicans as white. It then goes on to say how the racial status of Hispanics remains complicated. Legally, Hispanics are afforded the racial status of white people, yet socially, politically, and economically, they are treated as non-white. The article says Zimmerman embraced his white privilege by behaving and being treated as if he was credible and trustworthy even before the shooting. His whiteness allowed him to be viewed as credible and innocent. My third source is the book Pursuing Trayvon Martin, Historical Context and Contemporary Manifestations of Racial Dynamics. In this book, I'm focusing on Chapter 1, Now You See It, Now You Don't, Magic Tricks of White Supremacy in the United States. This book also goes to talk about white supremacy and what it is and what it does. It talks about the conjuring trick of white supremacy whereby racism disappeared and was ignored in the Trayvon Martin case. They go to blame the victim. Why was Trayvon Martin there? Why was he wearing a hood? And things like that. They completely replaced racism with real problems like guns and the stand your ground laws. The article goes on to say that in the United States, a white supremacist nation, these acts are not racist because there are no racists. My fourth resource is from the Latin Post, the article named George Zimmerman Ethnicity. Is he white, Latino, or white Hispanic? The article goes on to try to answer the question, what is a white Hispanic or white Latino? And they say the term can relate to other terms such as the Afro-Latin. Both terms capture an individual who lives on two sides of a coin. However, the term white Hispanic makes one remember the concept of passing, which permits one to take advantage of opportunities granted to them because of generally skin color. By labeling George Zimmerman a white Latino, he's granted white privileges. I look forward to doing more research on the question at issue, and that's all.